Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through stacks of sources, articles, all that research, and try to pull out the really powerful, sometimes surprising insights for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And today, wow, we are diving into the world of a leader who honestly kind of redefined what it means to be truly unshakable. We're talking about Indra Nooyi.
hmm
And when you just look at the raw numbers from her time as CEO of PepsiCo, they're monumental.
Oh, they certainly are. I mean, you're looking at 12 years running the show, right? Overseeing this absolutely colossal $29 billion jump in revenue growth.
29 billion.
Yeah. And delivering, get this, 162% shareholder return. Staggering.
It really is.
But you know what's maybe even more remarkable, or at least equally remarkable, about her time there? It isn't just the financials, impressive as they are.
Right.
It's what was kind of missing. You didn't see widespread reports of burnout. There was no major scandal, no public meltdowns. And this is despite just immense relentless pressure leading a Fortune 50 company.
That's the part that really makes you stop and, dig a little deeper, doesn't it? It just begs the question, what was Indra Nooyi made of? What allowed her to operate at such an incredibly high level for so long and still seem so well-grounded, so unflappable?
Yeah.
That's really the core question we want to explore in this deep dive. What made her so uniquely, so profoundly unshakable?
And her story, it's really so much more than just, another corporate success story. Although it is impressive.
Absolutely.
She was the genuine pioneer. I
Yeah.
mean, breaking ground in ways that were almost, unimaginable back then. Think about it. She wasn't just a CEO. She was the first woman of color to lead a Fortune 50 company.
That's huge.
She didn't just crack glass ceilings. She pretty much shattered them, opened up pathways for so many others coming up behind her.
And she didn't just step into the role and maintain the status quo. She fundamentally reshaped the entire identity of PepsiCo, took this global giant known mostly for, let's be real, junk food, right? That was the perception.
Yeah, largely.
And she deliberately, strategically turned it into what she called a purpose-driven empire.
Right.
But maybe the thing that grabs you even more, especially for someone managing, 260,000 employees globally.
Yeah, massive.
Is this really human dimension.
Yeah.
She was a mother who, completely against the usual C-suite narrative, somehow always prioritized getting home for dinner, never missed dinner with her kids.
That's just, it's such a stark contrast, isn't it? To those stories we always hear about total personal sacrifice at the executive level.
Totally.
It absolutely challenges those conventional leadership ideas we've all kind of gotten used to.
Yeah.
In this corporate world that often seems to demand extreme personal sacrifice.
Right.
Where leaders are basically told, pick one, performance or purpose. Nooyi just refused that choice.
Right.
She meticulously built both, showed that high performance and, deep purpose could actually thrive together.
Yeah.
And she built them to last.
And that really is the mission for us today in this deep dive. We want to go beyond just outlining what she achieved, even though those achievements are incredible.
We're digging much deeper into the daily habits, the strategic mindsets, the sort of unwavering principles that really cemented her legacy, made her one of the most respected, transformative business leaders of the 21st century.
Yeah, the how.
Exactly. Our goal is to understand how she lived, how she orchestrated her life and work, not just, what showed up on the quarterly reports. So you're definitely going to want to stick around for this one.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with something that honestly often just stops people in their tracks. It sounds almost impossible to keep up for long. Indra Nooyi's legendary sleep schedule.
Ah, yes. The 4 hours.
Right. For over a decade, at the absolute peak of her career, she reportedly slept only 4 hours a night. That's the story. Just 4 hours. And like you said, this wasn't during some quiet period or when she was just starting out.
Oh.
This was while leading PepsiCo, a massive global company, over 260,000 employees, operations in nearly 200 countries, and revenues climbing towards $64 billion a year. Just imagine the sheer volume of decisions, the constant travel, the relentless demands, all on that little sleep.
It's truly mind-boggling, the scale of responsibility to manage on what sounds like so little rest. And I think the common misconception, especially now with all the hustle culture talk, is that this was some kind of badge of honor, right? Like she was publicly declaring sleep deprivation was the ultimate sign of dedication. But that's really not how she saw it, is it?
No, you've hit on a really crucial point there. For Nooyi, sleeping 4 hours a night was never about, glorifying being exhausted or proving how tough she was.
Right.
It wasn't punishment, definitely not a boast.
Right.
It seems it was more of an intentional trade-off, a very deliberate decision. Yes, partly to stretch time, but maybe more importantly, to sharpen her presence.
Okay.
And critically, to create this consistent mental space for something a lot of leaders, especially caught in the daily whirlwind, just overlook: clarity. Yeah, it wasn't about being tired. It was about being incredibly focused, prepared, and, frankly, ahead of the game.
So if she was up at 4 a.m. every single day, she wasn't immediately jumping into urgent emails or prepping for back-to-back meetings like you might expect.
No, not at all, apparently.
What was she actually doing in those early hours then?
Her primary, non-negotiable activity at 4 a.m. was reading.
Reading. Okay.
And we're not talking a quick scan of headlines on her phone, no. She consumed 5 major newspapers daily, cover to cover.
5? Which ones?
The Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and her local paper, too. And she wasn't just skimming. We're talking full articles, editorials, data charts, even the smaller stories. The level of detail she absorbed was, well, intense, almost academic.
That just sounds like a monumental commitment every single day. What was it about that ritual that made it so essential for her leadership?
Well, for Nooyi, knowledge wasn't like a nice-to-have, something you pick up when you have free time. It was, and this is her phrase, a survival tool.
A survival tool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She famously said something like, if you're not constantly learning, you're not just standing still, you're going backward. I think that perfectly sums up her mindset.
It really does.
So, while her peers, her competitors, were probably still asleep, she was actively absorbing all these nuances of global economic shifts, figuring out subtle geopolitical moves, decoding cultural sentiment in different markets.
It's like she was training her mind.
Exactly. Like an athlete trains their muscles, daily, rigorously, before sunrise. It was her intellectual warm-up, preparing her for the day's strategic challenges.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because those quiet early hours weren't just about soaking up information, right? As important as that was, it sounds like they offered something deeper, something grounding.
Oh, absolutely. That early morning solitude, it basically became her sanctuary, her mental fortress, if you like. Think about the daily reality for a global CEO, the chaos, right? International travel, high-stakes boardrooms, constant media glare, shareholder pressure, endless crises popping up. Totally. And amidst all that, those quiet hours before the world really woke up gave her this incredible sense of control. It was a vital, uncompromised space to just think, to synthesize, prepare, and crucially, to zoom out.
Zoom out. I like that.
Yeah, and that consistent practice allowed her to lead proactively, strategically, to anticipate challenges and spot opportunities instead of just reacting to whatever fire drill landed on her desk that day.
So while maybe competitors were laser-focused on the next quarter's results, stuck in that short-term cycle,
Right.
she was operating on a totally different level. Reading the global tea leaves, planning for the next decade, that's a huge shift in perspective.
It's a complete reorientation of time and priority, isn't it? It speaks volumes about the depth of her strategic foresight.
Yeah.
Now, it is important to add a bit of nuance here, because even Nooyi herself later on admitted that this intense sleep schedule probably wasn't sustainable forever.
Okay, good point.
She did, in fact, recalibrate her routine later in her career. Talk more about rest and self-care then.
So she wasn't glorifying burnout. It wasn't a lifestyle she was pushing on everyone, or even herself indefinitely.
Exactly right. She was very clear about that. But what's undeniable is that during that intense 12-year run as CEO, that specific discipline and the deep intellectual foundation it gave her were absolutely key to keeping her mentally unshakable. It's what helped her navigate really severe market slumps, those evolving public health pressures, persistent Wall Street backlash. She even said, basically, this isn't for everyone. It worked for me during that chapter. Everyone needs to find their own rhythm.
And that, for me, that's where her real brilliance comes through. Her power wasn't just raw stamina, though clearly she had that.
Oh, yeah.
It was profound self-awareness and this almost surgical precision in crafting a schedule that perfectly matched her massive ambitions. She just refused to let external demands dictate her internal state or her time. She insisted on feeding her brain before the world started making its demands.
It fundamentally reframes what luxury even means, doesn't it? In a world just saturated with distractions, everyone fighting for a slice of your attention.
Yeah.
Indra Nooyi's greatest luxury wasn't money. It was attention, her own undivided attention. And she guarded that resource with ritual, with rigor, with relentless purpose. So yeah, 4 hours of sleep, But critically, it was paired with, maybe 4 hours of deep insight, control, mental armor, all before the day's battles even kicked off.
Okay, let's shift gears from her personal discipline to her huge corporate vision. Let's unpack performance with purpose. Because this wasn't just like a bold idea for PepsiCo. It was genuinely revolutionary for a company of that size in history, especially back then.
Oh, absolutely. When Nooyi took the CEO job in 2006, PepsiCo was, undeniably a financial giant. Brands like Pepsi, Lay's, Doritos, Mountain Dew, globally dominant, huge profits.
That's old names.
Totally. But the world outside was changing fast. Health trends were surging. Childhood obesity was constantly in the news. Governments everywhere were starting to crack down on sugar, salt, fat.
Yeah, you saw that shift happening.
And consumer trust in big corporations was definitely wobbling. There was a storm brewing, no doubt about it. And it threatened the very foundation of PepsiCo's traditional, bun products.
So she inherits this incredibly successful company, but she's staring down this unavoidable industry storm. And her move, which seems almost counterintuitive, wasn't to hide or dodge it, but to face it head on, coining this vision, performance with purpose. How did she actually translate that powerful phrase into something real for a company that massive?
Well, it was way more than just a catchy slogan or some PR move. Performance with purpose was a really carefully designed framework. It was meant to redefine PepsiCo's entire way of operating and, honestly, maybe offer a new model for modern capitalism itself.
Wow.
At its heart, it laid out this remarkably simple but really challenging principle. We can deliver strong financial results while doing what's right for people and the planet, rejecting that false choice between profit and ethics.
And she didn't just talk about it, she actually bakes it into the operations. How did she implement that across such a huge, diverse product line?
She did it by basically categorizing PepsiCo's entire portfolio into 3 distinct strategic buckets. First, the fun-for-you products, your classic indulgent stuff, original Pepsi, Lay's, Doritos.
Got it.
Second, the better-for-you category. This was reformulated products, significantly less sugar, fat, sodium, think diet sodas, baked chips, reduced salt snacks.
Yep.
And finally, the good-for-you segment. This was genuinely nutritious stuff. Quaker oats, nuts, whole grains, protein snacks. And this wasn't just marketing spin. It required a huge, costly shift in R&D, product development, supply chains, the whole 9 yards.
And she backed this whole thing up with concrete targets, really ambitious ones. That must have seemed crazy radical to the industry back then.
Oh, completely radical. For example, she publicly committed that by 2020, two-thirds of PepsiCo's global drinks would have under 100 calories per serving. She also committed to a 25% sodium reduction in key snacks, 15% less saturated fat. This was a massive statement. She was basically telling Wall Street, her suppliers, her own teams, future growth isn't coming at any cost to health or the environment. A total paradigm shift.
And I can just picture the resistance, the skepticism she must have faced inside and out.
Oh, yeah. The critics were loud and plentiful. Investors, especially the short-term focused ones, just scoffed, called it a distraction from the core, highly profitable stuff. Some analysts called it too soft, too idealistic for a Fortune 50 strategy. They argued focusing on health and sustainability would just dilute the brands, hurt profits. Many just couldn't grasp why a company would seemingly move away from its guaranteed high-margin products.
Yeah.
And internally, there's resistance too. Product teams had to completely rethink recipes, processes they'd used for decades.
But time tells the tale, right? By the end of her tenure, the numbers totally proved her strategy right.
Absolutely vindicated her. By the time she stepped down in 2017, revenue had grown massively from around $35 billion in 2006 to $63.5 billion.
Huge growth.
In shareholder value, up 162% under her leadership. Maybe most telling, those Better Good For You brands, Gatorade, Tropicana, Quakers, they saw explosive global growth. Showed consumers were shifting, rewarding companies aligned with their values.
Right.
And environmentally. The company cut water use by 26% per unit of production between 2006 and 2015. Proved purpose could also drive efficiency and savings.
So clearly, it worked financially, silenced a lot of critics. But beyond the numbers, what about the broader cultural impact within PepsiCo and maybe on the industry as a whole?
Inside PepsiCo, the cultural impact was really profound. Employees, from scientists and labs to folks on the sales floor, felt this renewed sense of purpose. They felt like their work was contributing to healthier families, sustainable practices, not just, selling soda and chips. That brings a deeper meaning, right? More engagement. And externally, the perception of PepsiCo really shifted. Less junk food giant, more responsible innovator. They got recognized as one of the first major food companies to really tackle its role in public health head-on. It's a huge reputational change.
And that kind of leadership from a giant like PepsiCo must have sent ripples across the whole food and beverage industry.
It absolutely did. Nooyi's vision kind of gave permission and maybe even created competitive pressure for others to follow suit. Soon after, you saw Coke investing more in water and healthier options. Nestle revised sugar targets. Unilever started focusing more on long-term, socially conscious value.
Interesting.
Nooyi's strategy wasn't just profitable. It was, in a way, prophetic. She saw that in this increasingly transparent, value-driven world, purpose wasn't some side project. It was the engine for sustained growth.
She proved really clearly that a company could lead with its conscience without hurting its competitiveness. And that makes me think of her quote about it. The most important word in performance with purpose is with.
That just sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? It underscored that purpose, humanity, responsibility. They weren't add-ons. They were integral to performance. It was about building a company that earned the world's respect and loyalty, not just its cash. A whole new way of doing business for the 21st century, really.
Okay, from that huge corporate strategy, let's pivot to something incredibly personal and, honestly, pretty unconventional for a CEO at her level. Indra Nooyi's unique way of building fierce loyalty, not with big bonuses or fancy retreats, but with handwritten letters.
Ah, yes. And this is where it gets really distinct, right? Because these letters weren't just going to her top executives.
No.
They were going to their parents.
To their parents.
To their parents. It's just so unexpected, so deeply personal, almost, old-fashioned in the high-stakes, often impersonal world of Fortune 50 leadership. It just cuts right through all the corporate noise.
It really does. What was the story behind that? How did that start?
It came from this really touching personal moment. After she was named CEO, Indra went back to visit her childhood home in Chennai, India. And amidst all the celebrations, her mother pulled her aside. But instead of just praising her big corporate job, her mom looked at her and said basically, "You might be CEO out there, but in this house, you're still our daughter."
Powerful.
And that just hit Nooyi profoundly. She realized, despite all her global power, this simple truth. Behind every high performer, every dedicated exec, there's a family. Parents, usually, who shaped them, taught them values, supported them. She saw these families as the sort of unsung heroes behind her workforce.
So how did she turn that powerful realization into a regular practice at PepsiCo?
Well, whenever a senior executive got promoted or recognized for something outstanding or hit a big milestone, Nooyi would actually take the time, often late at night apparently, to write a personal, heartfelt letter directly to their parents.
Wow.
And in these letters, it wasn't just generic congrats. She'd specifically thank the parents for raising such an amazing person. She'd describe their child's specific impact at PepsiCo, but maybe mention a project they nailed. And she'd convey how incredibly proud they should feel.
And these weren't typed notes from an assistant?
No. They were handwritten, thoughtful, personal, clearly came straight from her. She literally invested her own time and emotion into every single one.
I can only imagine the shock, the emotion of getting a letter like that from the CEO of PepsiCo. The impact must have been massive.
Oh, their reactions were reportedly incredible. Lots of parents were so moved they actually framed the letters, put them up in their homes.
I bet.
Some apparently cried reading them. Many just expressed disbelief, like, we've never gotten a letter from a CEO before.
Yeah.
Shows how unique it was.
Yeah.
And crucially, for the executives themselves, the impact was maybe even deeper. They didn't just feel valued. They felt profoundly seen. Deeply connected, not just to the job, but to the mission and to Nooyi herself, personally. There's this great story about one VP whose parents kept the letter on the mantelpiece for years. And he said it made him work harder because he never wanted to let her or them down. Created this almost like family loyalty.
What's so fascinating is that this wasn't just, being sentimental or touchy-feely. It was leadership at its most empathetic, yes, but also incredibly strategically smart.
Absolutely. Nooyi understood something most leaders, especially in huge companies, just miss entirely. When you honor someone's family, you're honoring their roots, their foundation.
Right.
And when people feel rooted, feel like their whole self, including their family, is seen and valued, they don't just follow instructions. They don't just do their job. They commit. They commit their whole being to the vision, to the company.
Yeah.
This deeply human habit. It wasn't just a quirk. It represented her whole philosophy of leading the whole person, not just the professional mask they wear to work.
And the payoff in terms of loyalty retention must have been significant.
Exactly. This practice definitely contributed to PepsiCo not having the crazy high churn rates you see elsewhere in corporate America.
Yeah.
It built this unique culture of recognition that went way beyond job titles, right into the heart of what motivates people. You know, in a world struggling with loyalty, engagement, burnout, this small, quiet, sincere habit is just such a powerful case study in emotional intelligence at scale. Anyone can cut a check, right? Anyone can give a bonus, but very few leaders know how to genuinely build that deep sense of belonging. Indra Nooyi did it, literally one letter at a time.
That's truly something. And speaking of personal habits revealing deep leadership, let's talk about her dinner table rule. Another one that just flew right in the face of typical corporate expectations for someone at her level.
Oh, it really did. I mean, here she is, this undeniable powerhouse in global boardrooms, schedule packed with travel, negotiations, constant demands. Yet she went home at 6 p.m. Every single day.
Every day.
Every day. Not just sometimes. Not a flexible goal. No matter where she was headquarters, traveling internationally, no matter the work piled up, her non-negotiable ritual was cooking and eating dinner with her 2 daughters.
That's more than just a habit. For a CEO running a $64 billion global company, that's a powerful statement. Most people at that level are basically expected to be on call 24/7. Personal life comes second, third, fourth.
Exactly. It wasn't just a routine. It was this firm, unwavering declaration. The unspoken message, which she later articulated, was basically no role, no matter how powerful, how demanding, should cost you the people who love you, who depend on you. She decided early on, apparently, that if she couldn't be there for dinner, the job just wasn't worth it long term. And that quiet but firm boundary, yeah, it probably shocked some peers who worked till midnight, but it also earned immense respect.
And she was really upfront about how hard it was, wasn't she? She admitted in her memoir that balance wasn't easy, and she didn't always nail it.
Incredibly honest and vulnerable about it in her book, My Life in Full.
Ugh.
She talks freely about that constant, messy juggle, the imperfect balance. She admitted she didn't always get it right. Times she missed school events, felt massive guilt. And her daughters, naturally, sometimes resented her demanding job. There's a quote from her that's so relatable for anyone juggling demanding roles. You can never be a perfect CEO and a perfect mom at the same time. You're always missing something, but you try. You show up where it matters most.
Show up where it matters most.
Yeah. It wasn't about achieving some medical perfection. It was about consistent, intentional presence.
So how did that showing up look in practice beyond the dinner table?
Well, it meant things like getting up super early to hit 7 a.m. parent-teacher meetings before the markets open.
Oh.
It meant taking urgent calls from the car during school drop-offs, maybe phone on mute while the kids were chattering away.
Right.
And crucially, it meant physically leaving the office at 6:00 p.m., regardless, to make sure dinner happened around a table with conversation, not looking at a laptop. And through those actions, she wasn't just giving her kids her time, she was giving them something way more valuable. Her consistent presence, a predictable rhythm, stability, sending that clear, unmistakable message. You matter. Not just in theory, but right here on my actual high-pressure calendar.
What's the connection then between that deep personal commitment to boundaries at home and her leadership style back at PepsiCo?
Oh, it's a really powerful connection. Her commitment to personal boundaries translated directly into respecting boundaries at work. Yeah. She didn't just talk about work-life balance, she lived it. She actively encouraged her teams. Go home, take your weekends, protect your family time. And beyond just encouragement, she championed and actually implemented progressive policies at PepsiCo way before they were trendy.
Like what?
More generous parental leave, setting up on-site childcare, developing support systems to help employees integrate personal and professional lives better. This wasn't just about being nice, it was strategic, building a sustainable, loyal workforce.
So she wasn't just leading with that formidable intellect we talked about. She was leading with her whole life, actively pushing back against that toxic myth in corporate culture.
Precisely. Indra Nooyi actively, powerfully dismantled that toxic idea that real success at the top requires sacrificing your personal life, your soul, your relationships.
Yeah.
She proved high performance and high presence could coexist.
Yeah.
You could run a $64 billion global giant and still be the one chopping vegetables for dinner at 6:30. Her real influence wasn't just the bottom line, but empowering the next generation, especially women, parents, to believe power doesn't have to cost you love. And that, wow, that's a legacy way beyond any earnings report.
That sets up our next point perfectly, tying into her uniquely long-term view. Because in a corporate world that's almost, pathologically obsessed with short-term wins, quarterly earnings, immediate stock reactions, Indra Nooyi just rejected that whole game. She was always thinking in decades.
That really is her hallmark, isn't it? A defining trait. The dominant corporate way, like you said, is hyper-focused on the next 3 months. Pleasing Wall Street, boosting profits now, cutting costs for quick metrics. Most leaders feel trapped in that game, often sacrificing long-term vision. But Nooyi just refused to play by those rules. Her philosophy was crystal clear. If you want to build something that lasts, something that endures for generations, you have to stop thinking in quarters and start thinking in decades.
And she didn't just talk the talk. She walked the walk with some incredibly strategic, often brave investments, even during really tough economic times.
Oh, definitely. A prime example really highlights her conviction is 2008, right in the middle of the global financial crisis.
Yeah, bad time.
Right. Most companies everywhere were freezing innovation budgets, slashing R&D, cutting everything non-essential to protect margins. Nooyi did the exact opposite. She increased PepsiCo's investment in R&D by hundreds of millions.
Literally, during the crash.
During the crash.
Yeah.
She aggressively doubled down on those better-for-you products, invested heavily in new, sustainable packaging tech, explored alternative sweeteners, poured capital into supply chain efficiency, automation.
Though she wasn't just reacting to the crisis, she was strategically building for, 2020 and beyond.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the pushback she got from analysts and investors then.
Oh, the questioning was relentless, often pretty aggressive. Analysts openly challenged her. Why wasn't she protecting margins now? Why not just focus all resources on the proven, high-performing core brands? They saw those long-term investments as, well, reckless during a downturn. But her reply was always consistent, unwavering. If we wait, we'll be late, and if we're late, we'll lose. She just had this crystal clear vision of where consumers and health trends were going, and she wasn't going to be swayed by short-term panic or skepticism. She saw a future others didn't, or maybe wouldn't see.
And it sounds like she applied that long-term thinking way beyond just products. It was about people, the planet.
Absolutely. That thinking and decades mindset went through everything at PepsiCo. She applied it to human capital, for instance, launched these big global leadership development programs to groom future execs, knew the results wouldn't show up for years, maybe a decade. But it was crucial for the company's future leadership. And critically, she championed environmental sustainability.
Right.
Huge investments in water conservation, energy efficiency, waste reduction across PepsiCo's massive global operations.
And not just for PR.
No, not just for the CSR reports. She deeply understood the compounding effect of smart early moves. Like that water example. Between 2006 and 2015, they cut water use 26% per unit. Saved millions of gallons of water, yes, but also saved millions of dollars over time. Good for the planet, good for the bottom line, perfect performance with purpose.
So by the time she finished her tenure, it was undeniable. Those bold, long-term bets totally paid off, defying the short-term naysayers.
They did, spectacularly. By the time she left the CEO role, those healthier product lines analysts had dismissed. Double-digit growth, especially in emerging markets like Asia, Latin America, where the middle class wanted healthier options. Supply chain costs dropped because of those early tech investments she pushed. And crucially, PepsiCo's brand reputation soared among younger, values-driven consumers who actually cared about a company's impact. And the ultimate proof, that 162% shareholder return over her 12 years.
What Indra Nooyi really got, and what so many leaders seem to forget or are maybe just afraid to act on, is that trust isn't built in a quarter. Real sustainable value isn't just created by flashy press releases.
Exactly. Real lasting impact doesn't happen overnight or just through aggressive financial moves. It takes incredible patience, courage to plant seeds and nurture them, discipline to let them grow while everyone else is chasing instant gratification.
Yeah.
In many ways, Nooyi didn't just lead PepsiCo, she fundamentally retrained it. Retrained this huge global company to think deeper, operate strategically slower, and play a much smarter, longer game. Her unshakable nature came from refusing to let the immediate noise, the quarterly pressure, the media drown out the sound of the future she was building. She was an architect, not just a reactor.
Which, ironically, brings us to maybe the ultimate test of her leadership, her unshakable core, the breaking point. That period when the whole world seemed to be shaking around her, and she just refused to flinch.
Yeah, every truly transformative leader hits that storm, right? That moment their vision faces its toughest test. For Nooyi, it really came together around 2012.
Okay.
Her big performance with purpose strategy was fully underway. Billions invested in cutting sodium sugar, developing healthier alternatives. But despite the progress, the market, especially Wall Street, was still unconvinced, actually grew more hostile.
So analysts started loudly questioning her core strategy, asking if she was like sacrificing Pepsi's core for an idealistic vision, making jabs like demanding ROI on quinoa snacks. Really pointed stuff.
Exactly. The pressure was just immense. Some big activist investors started aggressively pushing for PepsiCo to break up spin-off snacks and beverages separately. Argued her integrated vision was too complex, that leaner companies would unlock more value.
Wow.
But what's really crucial here is that the criticism went beyond just business strategy.
It got personal, didn't it?
Well, absolutely. Articles started popping up questioning if she was too academic, too cautious, even too empathetic to be a Fortune 50 CEO, implying those were weaknesses in the tough corporate world.
Yeah.
And you have to remember the extra layer of scrutiny she faced, not just as CEO, but as a woman of color, a mother, in a corporate world still overwhelmingly male, even in 2012. Every move was seen through those lenses. Added pressure, added judgment.
The pressure to just give in, go back to the traditional high-margin sugar stuff just to quiet the noise and please investors, it must have been almost overwhelming. It was the easy out.
Incredibly tempting, you'd imagine. Many leaders would have pivoted, scaled back, at least made big concessions. But Nooyi, absolutely unflinching, didn't backtrack an inch. Instead, she courageously doubled down on her original strategy, reaffirmed her belief in it. She calmly but powerfully told shareholders, "We're building a PepsiCo for the next generation, not the next headline." Framed it as a consistent glide path, gradual transformation, long-term benefits. And her conviction wasn't just emotion. It was backed by data, market insights, long-term projections, playing chess where others played checkers.
And as it seems to happen with true visionaries, eventually the tide turned.
It did. By 2015, just a few years later, her long-term vision was proving profoundly right. Those low-sugar drinks they'd dismissed started out selling the full-calorie ones, grabbing market share, healthier brands like Quaker, Tropicana, expanding globally, great growth rates, and crucially, that growing millennial group prioritizing health and sustainability. They gravitated towards PepsiCo's wellness brands, validated her foresight completely.
So the very strategies she was attacked for became the engine for the next decade of growth. The irony is incredible.
Totally. And through all that immense pressure, the personal attacks, the public doubt, she never lashed out, never got defensive, never lost sight of her core values or her long-term vision.
That right there, that's the essence of being unshakable, isn't it?
It truly is. It doesn't come from shouting loudest or aggressive counterattacks or being immune to feeling pressure. Real strength comes from having the conviction to stand still when the world is shaking around you, when every voice is telling you you're wrong. Nooyi faced her biggest test, not when things were easy, but when everyone told her she was misguided, idealistic, financially irresponsible, and she passed it. Not by force, but by unwavering faith in her values, her vision, and the quiet compounding power of playing the long game. That right there is what makes someone truly unshakable.
What an incredible, really transformative journey to follow. 12 years, 4 hours of sleep, that massive $29 billion revenue leap, and fundamentally reimagining a global food giant. Indra Nooyi didn't just lead PepsiCo. She genuinely reshaped what leadership could even look like in the 21st century. Her approach wasn't louder or harsher or flashier. It was deeper, sharper, and just profoundly more human.
Yeah, she taught the world, really through her own experience, some incredibly powerful counterintuitive lessons. Like, you can actually run a multi-billion-dollar global company and still make it home for dinner with your family consistently.
Right.
That you can weave purpose right into the core of corporate performance without losing shareholders or hurting financial results.
She showed us you can write those deeply personal thank you letters to your team's parents, building real emotional bonds, and still demand absolute excellence and top performance from those same people. And that you can bravely invest for a decade out, strategically tune out the noise of the immediate quarter, trusting that the long-term vision will win.
She also powerfully proved you can be soft-spoken, deeply emotionally intelligent, champion empathy, and still be the fiercest, most resolute force in the room when push comes to shove. Yeah. And maybe, above all, her legacy just clearly shows you can lead a massive company, achieve incredible success, and do it without breaking yourself, sacrificing your core values, or losing your soul along the way.
So when we talk about being unshakable, what does it really mean then? It's clearly not about just being tough in the old school way or immune to pressure or criticism or even getting tired, right?
No, not at all. Being truly unshakable seems to be about building a life, a vision, a set of principles so deeply rooted, so clear to yourself, that even the biggest storms can't knock you off your path.
Mm.
It's about having values so embedded in your daily actions that even your critics, eventually, maybe even without realizing it, start to follow your lead. It's about consistently showing up, not necessarily as a perfect leader because who he has,
Yeah.
but as a present one. Present to your vision, your people, your own truth.
Indra Nooyi's lasting legacy, it goes so far beyond the financial numbers, which, eventually just becomes history. Her real impact is in the sustainable systems she built, the countless people she lifted up and inspired,
Yeah.
and the profound permission she gave to future leaders, especially women, immigrants, to really lead from their whole selves, to lead because of who they are with all their unique perspectives, not in spite of them.
So if you ever want to understand what makes someone truly resilient, grounded, unshakable,
Right.
look past the headlines, the awards.
Yeah.
Look instead at the quiet rituals they keep day in, day out. Look at the courageous long-term bets they're willing to make when others are scared. Observe how fiercely they protect their people and their core values. And maybe most importantly, notice how they never ever stop learning.
Because at the end of the day, power fades, profits go up and down, reputations change. But character, that foundational, unwavering core character compounds. And Indra Nooyi, through every single day of her remarkable life and leadership, compounded her character, built an unshakable foundation for herself and for PepsiCo.
So if this story, this deep dive into her life,
Yeah.
if it resonated with you, don't just remember the fancy title or the big numbers. Remember her unique habits, her deeply held values, and that incredible ability she had to hold space for both the high-stakes boardroom and the intimate dinner table.
The essence of real leadership, it isn't truly about the corner office or the stock price or what people say about you. It's about what you choose to protect when no one's looking, what hard calls you make when time's tight and the pressure's on, and how steady you stay when the world wants you to bend.
Yeah. And if you recognize even a tiny piece of yourself in her journey, that drive, those moments of doubt, that discipline, that commitment to purpose, then just keep going, keep building. Not just your career, but your fundamental core.
And if you believe, like we do, that the world really needs more leaders like her calm, long-term focused, quietly powerful, profoundly human, then please share this story. Because success shared.
Well, that's always success multiplied.
And who knows, the next unshakable one, it might just be you.